Amanda and Jacob, a young and passionate couple, seemed perfect at first glance. Their lavish wedding was like a fairy tale, and their honeymoon in the Bahamas was supposed to be the beginning of a lifetime of happiness. But just days after saying "I do," Amanda was found dead on a secluded beach, her body bruised and broken. Jacob claimed it was a tragic accident, but the evidence told a different story, a tale of greed, deception, and premeditated murder. Amanda had always dreamed of a perfect wedding, a grand ceremony, a loving husband, and a honeymoon in paradise. It seemed like she had everything she had ever wished for. Her friends envied the whirlwind romance she had with Jacob, a charming and successful man who had completely swept her off her feet. Their wedding was nothing short of magical, an opulent event that made its way into lifestyle magazines. From the outside, they appeared to be the ideal couple, deeply in love and ready to start their new life together. For their honeymoon, Jacob had booked a luxurious stay at the Coral Reef Resort, an exclusive five-star retreat in the Bahamas known for its pristine beaches and private villas. From the moment they arrived, they were treated like royalty. Staff greeted them with champagne, the receptionist personally escorted them to their ocean view suite, and everything was set for a week of pure bliss. Other guests noticed the young couple, the way Amanda beamed with happiness, and how Jacob always kept a protective arm around her. They seemed inseparable. For the first 2 days, everything appeared perfect. They spent their mornings sipping cocktails by the infinity pool, their afternoons exploring the island, and their evenings enjoying romantic dinners on the beach. Amanda posted pictures on social media, smiling selfies, breathtaking sunsets, and snapshots of their extravagant meals. To the world, they were living the dream. But beneath the surface, small cracks began to appear. Some of the resort staff noticed subtle moments that didn't align with the image of a blissful couple. A housekeeper who cleaned their suite later recalled that Amanda seemed unusually tense, her shoulders rigid as she hastily gathered towels from the bathroom. A bartender by the beach remembered seeing her order a drink alone, staring at the ocean for a long time before Jacob approached her. When he did, she flinched slightly at his touch. These details seemed insignificant at the time, but in hindsight, they painted a different picture. On the third night, the couple attended a private beachfront dinner arranged by the resort. Other guests saw them laughing, clinking glasses under the soft glow of lanterns. It was a perfect moment. But later that night, everything changed. Around midnight, several guests in neighboring rooms were awakened by loud noises coming from their suite. Some thought it was just a heated argument, something not uncommon between couples who had been drinking. Others heard what sounded like a muffled scream that was quickly silenced. The noises stopped after a while and no one thought much of it. The next morning, Jacob walked into the resort lobby alone, his hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and his face pale. He told the receptionist that Amanda had gone for a midnight swim and never returned. The staff immediately launched a search. As the sun rose over the crystal-clear waters, the air was cool, and the waves gently lapped against the shore, but an unnatural tension filled the Coral Reef Resort. Staff members and security personnel spread out along the shoreline, calling Amanda's name as they searched for any sign of her. Other guests, having breakfast on their balconies, noticed the unusual activity below. The news spread quickly. One of the guests had gone missing overnight, and whispers of concern rippled through the resort. Jacob stood near the lobby, watching the search unfold. His expression was difficult to read. His distress seemed exaggerated, his hands constantly running through his hair, and his voice unsteady as he spoke with the staff. But what stood out the most was his lack of urgency. He wasn't down on the beach searching, calling out Amanda's name. He wasn't demanding answers or frantically asking what else could be done. He was just waiting. It didn't take long before a staff member made a grim discovery. Near the rocky shoreline, partially hidden by large boulders, lay Amanda's lifeless body. Her arms were twisted at unnatural angles, her face swollen, her dark hair tangled with seaweed. At first glance, it might have seemed like a tragic accident. A woman pulled in by the tide, her body battered by the rocks. But something was off. When authorities arrived, Officer Mark Black was among the first on the scene. Examining Amanda's injuries, he felt an immediate sense of unease. He had seen drowning victims before, and this didn't fit the pattern. Her wounds were concentrated around her head and arms, her bruises deep and fresh. There were no signs of struggle in the sand leading to the water, no evidence that she had wandered out for a midnight swim. It felt staged, and Mark knew it. Jacob was brought to the scene and informed of his wife's death. His reaction was immediate, loud, dramatic sobs, almost too perfect, as if rehearsed. He dropped to his knees, shaking his head, pressing his hands against his face. But as the officers watched him, they couldn't help but notice what was missing. He never asked to see her body, never rushed forward in disbelief, never demanded to hold her one last time. Instead, he kept his distance, his grief more of a performance than a raw, uncontrollable reaction. During questioning, Jacob's story was inconsistent. At first, he claimed Amanda had been drinking heavily and decided to go for a swim alone. Then he changed his version, saying he had been asleep when she stepped outside for some air and only realized she was missing when he woke up. These contradictions raised suspicion. If his wife had truly vanished at midnight, why hadn't he raised the alarm sooner? Why had he waited until morning to report her missing? As investigators secured the scene and gathered statements, one thing became clear. Amanda's death was no accident. Something terrible had happened in that hotel room, and the truth was waiting to be uncovered. The autopsy report arrived the next afternoon, and with it, confirmation. Amanda Nilsson had not drowned. Dr. Sarah Jones, a forensic pathologist, meticulously detailed the findings. Amanda had suffered multiple severe blows to her head and face. Her skull was fractured, and there were deep bruises on her arms consistent with defensive wounds. She had fought back. There was no water in her lungs, meaning she was not alive when she entered the water. Someone had beaten her to death and then staged the scene to look like an accident. Upon examining the couple's hotel room, more disturbing evidence emerged. The bed was disheveled, pillows were thrown to the floor, and a broken glass near the minibar lay shattered, its fragments scattered across the carpet. But the most critical discovery was in the bathroom. Traces of blood that had been cleaned but were still visible under forensic testing. It wasn't a large amount, just small smears along the edge of the sink and in the grout between the tiles, as if someone had tried to wipe it away. Surveillance footage from the resort provided further clues. At 3:12 a.m., Jacob was seen leaving the suite alone, carrying a bundle of dark clothing. He appeared disoriented, glancing over his shoulder several times as he headed toward the beach. His return to the room was recorded an hour later, his hands shoved in his pockets and his body language tense. Investigators suspected that during this time, he had moved Amanda's body, dragging her lifeless form to the shore and leaving her there before the waves carried her away. Jacob was interrogated again, this time by Detective David Morgan, who had taken charge of the case. His responses were erratic, his emotions oscillating between anger and grief. He insisted that Amanda had been drinking heavily, that she often made reckless decisions, and that her going out alone wasn't unusual. But the evidence told a different story. Amanda's toxicology report showed only trace amounts of alcohol in her system, not enough to impair her or cause her to fall into the ocean. The bruises on her body weren't from a fall, they were from fists. David pressed harder, asking Jacob about their relationship. Had there been tension? Had they argued that night? Jacob denied everything. He claimed they were happy, that they had spent the night celebrating their wedding. But resort staff provided statements that contradicted his account. A housekeeper had heard raised voices from their room earlier that evening. A bartender recalled Jacob drinking alone at the bar, his mood dark, his fingers gripping the glass tightly. The pressure mounted, but Jacob refused to confess. He hired a lawyer and maintained his innocence, portraying himself as a grieving husband. Yet the inconsistencies in his story, the evidence in the hotel room, and the autopsy findings all pointed in one direction. Amanda hadn't drowned, she had been murdered, and the man who was supposed to love her had become the prime suspect in her brutal killing. Just as authorities were building their case against Jacob, an unexpected witness came forward with crucial evidence. Alexander White, a tourist staying at the resort, had gone for a late-night walk on the beach the night Amanda disappeared. At the time, he hadn't thought much of what he'd seen, but after hearing about Amanda's death, he realized he might have witnessed something significant. Alexander recalled seeing a couple near the cliffs engaged in a heated argument. He wasn't close enough to hear their words, but their body language was unmistakable. Aggression, tension, and fear. The man had forcefully grabbed the woman's wrist as she struggled to break free. She had raised her hand defensively, but he pulled her closer. The altercation lasted only a few minutes before Alexander continued his walk, assuming it was just a lover's quarrel. He had even taken a quick photo of the shoreline that night, and when he checked his phone, he realized the blurry image had captured the couple in the distance, though their faces weren't clear. The timestamp and location perfectly matched the time Amanda was last seen alive. Detective David immediately pursued this new lead. Alexander's testimony, along with the photo, placed Jacob at the scene and contradicted his claims of being asleep in the suite while Amanda went for a swim. The case against him grew stronger by the hour. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something even more shocking: motive. Jacob wasn't the wealthy, successful man he pretended to be. His financial records revealed he was drowning in debt, with failed investments, gambling losses, and mounting pressure from creditors, leaving him in a desperate position. Just a few months before their wedding, Jacob had taken out a $1 million life insurance policy on Amanda. Investigators now believed he had never truly loved her. He had seen Amanda as an asset, a ticket out of his financial troubles. As the truth unraveled, Jacob had no choice but to confess. He admitted to arguing with Amanda that night and, in a moment of rage, beating her to death. He claimed the killing was accidental, a moment of madness, but the evidence told a different story. Amanda had been the victim of a calculated, premeditated plot, a murder carried out by the man who was supposed to love and protect her. Jacob Brown was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Amanda's case served as a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and even the most perfect-seeming relationships can hide dark secrets. Amanda's heart was forever broken on that quiet shore. In her memory, let us take a moment of silence and share our thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, support us by liking the video and join our channel for more heartbreaking tales.